we can, like unlock a lot of, like sales growth for smaller people, give them, like very high quality, like solutions, but at a reasonable price. And that's what we, like focus on, that how do we, like help you build great security, get your certifications, but, like you don't break a bank. And we have, like all seen the, like pricing and packaging games, like I have played them myself, like earlier in my career, but like we are not doing that at ComplyJet, like you see one number and, like all the modules, like come for that one number, like I'm treating people how I want to be treated, like myself. And so far it's going okay.
This is Super SaaS Bros with Cory and Jayde. Let's jump in. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Super SaaS Bros. We are your hosts, Cory and Jayde Silva. Today we have an awesome founder joining us as a guest on the podcast. He has spent over 15 years building businesses, building products in like e-com, financial services, enterprise AI, and now he is building a fast-growing startup in the compliance space for SaaS startups, which is really cool. So thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
I'm excited for here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. So we always like to put our guests a little bit in a scenario to start, just to kind of warm up a bit. So, you're heading into downtown, you call an Uber, you get into the Uber, and the Uber asks, like, what do you do, man? What are you telling them?
I help people gain trust so that they can sell more. That's, like what we do. Everything else, like helping people build their security, get compliance, like certifications is a means to that, an end. But early stage startups, like founders realize that people don't trust them with their data. They want to see a proxy for that, and security and compliances are all about that. And we help fasten that journey using our platform and, like expert guidance. That's what we unlock for our customers.
Incredible. Okay, cool. So like I'm gonna jump right into this because like obviously I run a startup, we have 6 Summit, we do a bunch of micro SaaS, we like help clients with like building custom softwares, AI solutions. And so a lot of things that we get into, like the nitty-gritty, are like CASA tier two, SOC 2, all this stuff. There's the Vantas of the world that's like
Yeah.
30 grand a year, right? Talk to me about how you fit into this market and how you kind of like compete with like a Vanta.
Absolutely. Like I think a lot of the inspiration for, like building this came when I was leading product at Instabase. Like we were on-prem software for large banks and insurance companies. No platform could do SOC 2 for us. So we got an agency, spent 200 grand on it. And, like in parallel, like I love supporting other founders. So like I was an investor in, like 25 SaaS companies, and, like all of them were scrambling and paying, like 20, 30 grand to Vanta. And at some point it felt that like, people are being cheated for not being a security and compliance expert. Ultimately, a GRC platform is, like a database on steroids. Like you shouldn't be charging people 20, 30 grand, like that's a lot of money. And I think as I was building, like enterprise AI, like it was a great business, like, but I wanted to go back to, like building for, like SMBs. And, like I saw this is a space where we can, like unlock a lot of, like sales growth for smaller people, give them, like very high quality, like solutions, but at a reasonable price. And that's what we, like focus on, that how do we, like help you build great security, get your certifications, but, like you don't break a bank. And there are no, like we have, like all seen the, like pricing and packaging games. I have played them myself, like earlier in my career, but like we are not doing that at ComplyJet, like you see one number and, like all the modules, like come for that one number, like a startup founder doesn't want to, like find, like something unknown on, like that contract or the upgrade, like within a 12 months, like into the conversation. So yeah, like we are keeping things simple. Like I'm treating people how I want to be treated, like myself. And so far it's going okay.
If you guys aren't watching this on YouTube, you wouldn't see that I have the biggest smile on my face right now because I feel like this is just, if you've ever had an issue with your house and you call a plumber and the plumber's going to charge you like $1,000 when it was really a $12 job, this is kind
Yeah.
of exactly how it's like analogous to this. And so like one of the things that I'm currently facing right now is like CASA tier two, and I'm getting quotes all over the place that just don't make sense to me. I'm getting quotes up like to 25 grand annually
Yeah.
to $1,800 annually, and I'm just like, I don't understand
Yeah.
where the price to like the value is. Like you're telling me right now you can come in and like your whole like methodology is we want to be an affordable a solution for small businesses so that when they come in, they can make sure that they have all their security handled and they're not wasting and dumping a lot of money. So there's this like moral and ethics approach to it, and I love that. So this is what I've been personally looking for. It's especially today. I just got off a call with GCP right before this, and yeah, they got all these vendors, and I'm like talking to them like, guys, I don't understand like what the true price is. So it's very weird to someone like myself.
Actually, like what's really interesting, like we were designing our, like pricing page, and we,
Yeah,
like went and looked at, like everyone else's, and there is no price.
there's no price.
There is a pricing page, there is, like a plan, there are
Yeah,
features, but, like there is no price there. And, like
So
everyone
contact
wants you to
us.
jump on a call and we will do a custom quote. This should not be so hard, like there is a software and, like you should be able to, like price your software license. So one of the things that we do, like couple of things which are, like very different, like at least on the procurement processes, there is a number and that number is visible, like loudly and clearly on the website.
yeah.
And there is a free trial. You don't have to talk to, like any AE,
Oh,
like to, like check us. And a
yeah.
lot of builders, like there are, like builders who don't want to talk to anybody. Like people have, like signed our, like order agreement and they haven't seen my face. And I love that, like
Right? I like that. Yeah,
why do you
exactly.
need to talk to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think like that's like one of the things which is so interesting. Like founders feel cheated so many times because they are being penalized for not being amazing negotiators. Like they realize that somebody is paying less than half of what they're paying because they were able to negotiate better. And like that's a horrible, like feeling to have. Like as an early stage founder.
I also feel like the better you're doing in your business, the more they're quoting you. So they'll come in, they'll be like, okay,
Mhm.
so talk to me about like what stage are you at in the company? Like what was your
Yeah.
last year's annual revenue? It's like, oh, I did $10 million versus I did
Mhm.
500K.
Yeah.
$10 million, they're gonna quote you 25K versus half
Yeah.
a K, half a million. It's like, okay, we'll do for 1800.
Yeah.
What is that?
I
That's
think like
crazy, man.
you are paying a compliance tax.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a compliance tax.
What's been this like? So you're making it simpler, but like,
Mhm.
what has been like the maybe the hardest thing that you've been dealing with trying to like position yourself in that way? Because I know there's probably still hurdles from your perspective, like as a business, like you're trying to make sure that like you're affordable while still be able to like deliver on
Yeah.
what you're actually saying. So has been anything like really sticky and tough in the compliance area? Because like Jade was just talking about like talking to GCP and you have these preferred partners like Casa 2, you have to do very specific types of like testing and certain and all this jazz. Like how are you
Yeah.
dealing with that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Like I, like tell my team, like to lean in the opposite direction. Like I tell them, you walk down a Walmart aisle, you walk down a Costco aisle, there are, like 100 brands of cereal, and like people do not know, like how to differentiate, right? Like,
Right,
and I believe that like software is becoming like that. Like there is an amazing, like ability to, like create and like distribute software,
right,
but it also means that like it's becoming more of the same. And we have to think like like these people working in Kimberly Clark and like Kellogg's, that storytelling and like how do you sort of like put your like narrative out there is going to be like so important in this world out there. Half of the team at ComplyJet is like building like some form of content and like engaged in marketing.
That's
We
awesome.
believe that like we have amazing software, but does it do anything fundamentally different than like what any of our competitors do? No, right? Like, and I ask my people to like lean into that. Yeah, like it is not different, but like how do you get people to trust you and see you as like a credible brand that they want to associate themselves with? And I think like we are leaning into that.
I love that because at that same time, it's like nobody really cares about your solution. They care about their problem, right? And
Mhm.
so, like you said, like there's tons of startups, or sorry, tons of softwares and your competitors, and you're all kind of doing the same thing, right? But now you're kind of talking about building the brand around it, which is really just building trust. And why should they
Mhm.
come in? It's because they trust you. The storytelling that you have behind it, they can resonate with it. There's authenticity behind it, and then at that point they would just like right now, like I'm ready to call you right after this podcast. Like this is exactly, you know how to build trust. And I think that's what differentiates a lot of software founders in the market.
Absolutely. It has been like very interesting to me. We, do some amount of, like content on LinkedIn, like that's where a lot of the
Yeah,
founders are hanging out, like all
yeah,
the time.
yeah,
And there have been so many people who have, like told me that I thought that, like all the compliance people were, like scumbags. And I guess, like they see,
sure,
like reasons for, like saying
sure,
that. And they said, your like content feels like I can relate to you. You seem like like a reasonable person, and therefore like I want to talk to you because
yeah,
I believe that like what you will be saying like would be genuine. And I think like it is, first of all, like something that like all of us need to do better, like in how we are like selling software. But I agree that the whole brand opportunity both around like the founders and like the company is super important, that trust is like very important, like in how things go forward, like from here.
Yeah, and we talked about last time, but right before this podcast, about distribution, and you just mentioned that like a bunch of people that work for ComplyJet are really focused on like also creating content as well. How did you get to that point of like? Because I feel like sometimes when people think about creating content, there's this initial hurdle. They're like, it's a long tail game, right? You're building trust. You're creating this content. People sometimes don't believe in like the personal brand or the brand of the company, and so it's like it takes time and like to get people on that same vision. How did you do that with ComplyJet to get employees to be like, yeah, let's create content and that's just who we are.
Yeah. I think like some of that is, based on the DNA of the founders. Like there are two of us. Like I used to, like make movies, earlier, like in my life. Storytelling is something that, like I'm really passionate about, like both in written and, video form. My partner, like used to run a podcast and, like he has interviewed, like hundreds of entrepreneurs out there, like trying to understand how they grow. So for both of us, like this was something that, like came very naturally, like we,
Nice.
like believe that, like content like has longevity. It is one of the like best ways to tell your story. I think like especially when you are like working with constrained resources, like at least now you can like put your voice out there, and we are not shy about shouting out like from the top of the roofs. So
yeah,
content like felt very natural like to us. I think
yeah,
it's also something that everyone is embracing because there are success stories out there where people are like building brands like as founders and as companies, and like now everyone is sort of like leaning into that. And I think sometimes like the short term effects are not there, maybe like building a lot of content will not fill your pipeline in the next 6 months, and we are okay with that. Like we are playing a long term game, and the brand and the voice we are building, if it like we believe it will generate positive returns in the long run, and we do not care about like how much does it swing the pipeline like in the next couple of quarters. So we are okay. We are not like putting pressure on ourselves or our team, like, hey, how much like did this produce. And I think a lot of teams like make that mistake. They start investing in content, but then they are looking for short term rewards, which are like sometimes really hard.
right. One of the best pieces of advice I got in terms of creating content and just pushing yourself out there is like, don't make it about you. It's about them, right? And so when you make it about you, you start to kind of have this hesitation, this nervousness, trying to make this like idea of like perfection and make the post out there. And then you get discouraged if the analytics of the post come back and it's just like, it's not great, right? And so the whole point of just not making it about you is because you know you have a solution that helps someone's problem, right? You have dove into this problem, you've done all this market research. And so the content you're now creating is because you know you serve value. And so it doesn't really matter about how perfect the post is. It's just creating as much content as you know will create value for your audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think like you hit the nail on the head, like a lot of people um, are judging themselves, and, like they're very tied to, like how the content is performing. And if you are, like getting caught up in that, then, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And also, you know, I think people also get really, really stuck on just making content that is just about their product and or what value they can provide. Sometimes the value also just comes about just sharing who you are. Like there's this like, a diamond of the social construct of like posting where it's just like, yes, there's stuff that you can bring value to. There's also like what are your quirks? What's your downside, and also just what's the fun side of you, right? And be able to share all of that, because all of that, the other three tend to build trust so that the value actually has the value. So I think some people get lost in that. So, but I've been seeing some of your content as well on LinkedIn, and I think you're doing a great job. And yeah, It's just awesome to see, man. It's really cool to hear that, like,
Yeah.
your other
And I think like
co-founders doing the same.
it's important to be aware, right? Like, and maybe, like we need to learn a trick or two, like from some of the more successful politicians out there that like, it's all about your audience, like I know that, like even though security and compliance is super important, like most of the people don't want to talk about that. And, like they're far more interested in, like what my journey is. For example, I'm building a company now for the third time and, like what are the choices I'm making and what are
Yeah,
like some of the things like I'm doing differently. That's something that people take a lot more out of than like my commentary
totally.
on like how you can like cut time on SOC 2. And like how do we like do that like in a meaningful way, I think is important. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have this like relatability between like being relatable to like the masses, and then like those small things when you talk about like compliance that will hit your ICP, and they'll be like, oh, cool, nice, nice, nice. But you have to be overall be relatable, right? So
Yeah, here's my question for you. You've been doing this for over 15 years. You know, this is the third company that you started. You've seen a lot of success. Why are you still doing this?
I, like ask myself, what kind of life do I want to have like for the next, like 10, 15 years? And there are, like a few simple things, like which are important to me. Like I love spending time, like with my family. Like I have two young kids, so I want to make sure that, like I'm spending a lot of time with them, like in their formative years. I love building, like things which are beautiful and useful both. There is, like this artist in me, which loves the like creation itself, and like that's something which I really enjoy. And over time it just so happened that like I stayed in technology, like in a different life, like maybe I'm writing a book or like painting, like but technology is sort of like the way I express myself. And like that's something which I really like. I think one of the more intentional choices at ComplyJet has been, who do we choose to serve? Like I think like we very easily can like go and focus on like larger customers, but I don't love selling to them. I don't love like sitting across them and like learning about their businesses, whereas I can talk endlessly like with other founders. Like that is something which I like saw in the like first like 15 years of my career. So like it is very intentional. We are playing this like low ACV game, like which is not necessarily easy, but it just gives me so much energy. Like I am sort of like happy to chat like at 12 midnight to like a founder and like learn about like them being clueless, and like that doesn't feel like work. And I think that is like the part like which is hopefully my self-awareness like is a little bit higher 15 years into like my life than like before that. And just choosing like what like I live like in a smaller place which has like mountains, because I love like going for a hike like every weekend. And I think like that is like what I have a lot of privilege. Like I'm being able to like choose and design my life like on my terms, and I am like making full use of that privilege. And I think like a lot of my choices both in my personal and professional life like come from that. So it doesn't feel like work. Like of course like if you look at steps of like building a company, a lot of them are grinding, but like I'm not like, I get a lot of energy like by what I'm doing, and like that's why I'm doing it.
True
I
founder.
love that. Yeah, what a true founder. That's amazing, man. I think we're leaning into, I think, like a perfect way to kind of wrap up this conversation. And one question that we love to ask to all our guests is, if today was your last day, what's one piece of business or life wisdom that you want to leave behind to the audience?
Wow. I think that there's this like very famous, like a clan of, like people, like who were these Bushido warriors, like in Japan. And like they would, like dwell a lot upon, like death on a continuous basis. And, like that is something that they used to, like make choices on a daily basis. And I think like that's what I actually do. Like I'm into
So do I.
spirituality quite a bit.
I do that all the time. I didn't even know that was a thing.
And like I meditate, and like I like don't live somebody else's life. And I think like it is really easy like as an entrepreneur to start like living somebody else's life, chasing like somebody else's goals. I definitely have done a lot of that. I put a lot of like pressure on myself to create this like amazing big thing which will have like gigatons of impact. And I realized over time that like that wasn't very important to me. Like there were other things which were far more important. And now I'm living Varun's life, and like I'm really enjoying it. So my hope for, like all the founders out there is that, like be intellectually honest to yourself, like figure out, like what do you really care about and just, like chase that. And then, like it doesn't feel like work. It, like feels so much easier. And I think like this is something which a lot of people share, but like people find it very hard to do. Like people are always sort of like looking at a playbook, right? Like how do I raise money? How do I get my first 1,000 customers? How do I sort of like hire my VP of sales? And, like all of these things push us to, like live somebody else's life. And I think it's really important to live our own. And that's what, like I would hope for, like all the founders out there.
Man, words of wisdom. I love it. Dude, I love it so much. Varun, I really appreciate you being here, man. This was an awesome conversation. Guys, if you are listening, we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Varun, we got to have you on again. This was an incredible conversation. Probably make it an hour next time. If you guys are listening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And we will see y'all in the next one.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Super SaaS Bros with Cory and Jayde. We'll see you next time.